Hey, what's up? This is Paul Solt from Super Easy Apps. Today, I'm going to show you how to use the SwiftUI form attribute so that you can create something like this album settings view. Now, I have an Objective-C application. I want to update it, and we're going to design the UI that you see on this screen. So what does the app currently look like? It currently looks like this over on the left side. You're going to see title, manage album button, add photos button, some sliders, a date picker, and a delete button. I needed to update this. I want to clean up the UI a little bit. So I'm going to use SwiftUI and I'm going to show you how to do it from scratch. We're going to block out the UI, make it so that we can have everything on the screen. And let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to jump on over. Let me hide this. This is PhotoTable. So PhotoTable is an app that I have in the App Store. I published this in 2012 with Objective-C. And it's a multi-touch slideshow so that you can use both fingers on either hand. You can look at these different photos. You can move multiple photos around if you want. You can just throw them off the table. And if there's more photos in the album, they'll cycle on. So you'll start seeing more and more photos sort of in the background. So you can showcase your pets, you can showcase your work, different types of things. So I've had a lot of artists and photographers and creative type people want to use this for demos because it's a lot more tactile and you can demonstrate things. So the albums view, this is where we update our album settings. And so the main reason I want to update this UI is it doesn't support dark mode. And I could make it work with the storyboard file, or in this case, it's an XIB file, a nib file. I could update that, but I thought, it would be kind of cool if I could just redo this one screen. It's a very focused feature. I just need to be able to connect it to the different features. So I have this manage album button, and you can see on dark mode, it doesn't show the text because the text is white on white. Then you can see these photos, so you can edit or you can add them to the table if they're not currently on the table. Recently, I updated the add photos button to have a little pop-up button so I can choose between the photo or taking a photo with the camera, or even choosing from the files, which then gives you access to other data sources. So that's a super cool feature, which I can pull up the photo kit thing and just see a bunch of new photos. Awesome. And then what else do we have on here? So like the other thing, you can't even see the date picker. It's so white on white, and the new date picker has a new design language. So as with anything in technology, things are always changing and design language is going to evolve. So we built this initially to use the slider wheel date picker. Well, that doesn't exist anymore in iOS 17. This was built with iOS 6 and it's changed a little bit. So now Apple has this sort of inline picker where I can be like, oh yeah, this is from this date. And this is a lot older than that. This is from like 2000, maybe 15. And so we can pick a date that actually makes sense. But you can't see it because it's so light. It's white on white. All right. And then if you delete the album, there's a confirmation dialog. So that's what we're going to be updating. Over on the right, you can see that same interface in UIKit on an iPhone. So it's cross-platform between iPadOS and iOS. So we run on iPad as well as iPhone. And apparently I could install it on my Mac, though I thought I disabled that feature. So it's not fully supported there, but it is what it is. So let's jump on into Xcode. I'm going to actually make a brand new project. And what we're replacing is around 800 lines of code. And I lost it. So PhotoTable, here's PhotoTable. This is an Objective-C code file. This is all about displaying the date picker right here in that little popover and all kinds of fun stuff. So a lot of code in here that I want to replace with a lot less code. So let's go ahead and do a new project. And anytime I'm learning something new, starting a new project is the easiest way to get started. So I'm going to choose an iOS app, and then I'm going to select app, and we're going to call this a album settings form. When I worked at GoPro, sometimes created separate projects just to test out some of the UI, especially with SwiftUI. We're going to choose SwiftUI, language is Swift, storage, I'm going to do none. And do we need any tests? No, we don't need any tests for this. So I'm not going to enable that because we don't need it. All right, so if we go ahead and do that, I am just going to put it here. So let's go ahead and create it. And this gives us a starting playground. And I'm just going to hide this since we don't need this. I'm going to hide that since we don't need that. And we don't need this either. Okay, so let's make this take up this space so we can see it. We'll have our what we're matching over on the right. And we're sort of going to build towards that. All right, so the first thing that you're going to see is a content view, and you're going to see this album settings form. So what I want to do is I just want to call it album settings instead, album settings dialog. So we're going to change content view, and we should be able to rename this. So let's go ahead and just say refactor rename. And we're just going to call this albums settings dialog. Okay, and each one of these, if they're selected, is going to replace it. So let's go ahead, rename. And if that worked for you and you didn't have any problems and you see the new preview, give me a thumbs up. Thanks. All right. So I'm going to just shift this over a little bit, just slide this around. And what we have here is a vertical stack with an image and text. So you're going to see an image here and you're going to see text here. So to make a form, we're going to use the form attribute, and then we're just going to put in our text, our labels, special widgets that we can design, any special buttons that we can design, and some sliders with some supportive text. But we want to clean this up a little bit. We're going to sort of approach it a little bit differently. So let's start going. And the other thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to do my first commit. I like working with version control. So we're going to say renamed code album settings dialog. Great. We stage everything. We just commit. So I turn on version control. Once we do that, we're on the commit tab. We're seeing the most recent commit. These are all the changes we made. We made some project changes because we're renaming the file. So in Xcode, it is changing that in the Xcode project file, which is this project.pbxproj. All right, and then we can see all of our changes here, album settings, album settings. Apparently I didn't change that one comment, so we can manually change that ourselves. Okay, so let's jump in. I'll just change that at the top. And this is going to be our starting place. I'm going to go ahead and just find this on Finder and make a copy just so that if you want to follow along from the beginning, we can follow along from the beginning. Apparently that didn't work. Let's show in Finder. Here we go. Okay. So I like to just call this begin. That's going to be our starting point, and I'll turn this one into ends once we finish. So now that we have that started, we don't need all these additional targets. I mean, you could try it on your Apple Vision. I'm not going to do that right now. I'm just going to do this just for iPhone, just for demos. I don't need all the extra simulators. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on the iPhone Pro Max, which is the simulator. So up top here, this is our scheme editor. And then here's our target for like what device it's going to run. So if you have an iPhone, you can go ahead and select that. But if you don't have an iPhone and a developer profile, you're not going to be able to use that. So we're just going to use the iPhone 15 Pro Max. And then in here, we're just going to delete all of this. Oh, and I'm on Vim mode. Let me just turn that off because that's going to get in the way of this tutorial. Okay, so I'm going to delete our VStack and we're going to start defining the body here. So what we need at the top is a text field. So we're going to add a text field, and a text field is going to need a string title. So I'm just on my initial approach, we're just going to be blocking the UI. And all that means is make it look like we want, but it won't be perfect. Okay, so it's okay. We're just trying to get the structure down and then we'll clean it up. So this is our first step. Then we tweak it and then we connect it to logic. So we're not going to do anything other than print statements in this demo, but it's something that you can then integrate into an existing app. It's going to be a little bit more work for me to integrate this into my project because I have to juggle some things. So I'm not going to show that in this tutorial because I want to keep it super focused on the Swift UI. Okay, so Xcode is going to have all these warnings because we don't have anything returning. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to use the form attribute, and this is going to allow us to make a dialogue-like experience. And then we're going to create our text field. Now, a text field is going to require a title or text, and we can customize it with a prompt and a label. So what I want to do is I want to use this initializer. So if you start typing this and you do escape, it should show you these things. If you're on Vim mode, I think it's, I guess it works as well. Control space will bring that up as well. So you can do escape or control space, though in Vim mode, you can't do escape. So here, if we just start typing, it will autocomplete for us. But if we want to get all of these different attributes, then what we have to do is we have to hold the Alt. Let's see, it's not doing it. Yeah, hold Alt. It wasn't, normally it will change the font color, but it didn't seem to do that. All right, so we have text, prompt, and label. And what we need is something to bind to. So there's going to be a variable that's going to store the actual title. And to do that, we are going to create a variable. So variable, and then this is going to be our title. So var title, we'll make that a string type, and we'll set it initially to be blank because we don't want any text. So this is going to be the empty state for this view. Right now, this one has new album as a title, but we're just going to start the empty state. Now, since this is a SwiftUI structure, the other thing that we have to do is we have to use these special state properties. And just to block something out, state is going to be the easiest place to get started. So I'm going to go ahead and use that. And that's just going to make it so that we can mutate and that we can actually do the binding. And then down here with that state property wrapper, we can use the $sign and then the name of the variable, and it's going to create that binding to that string. If we didn't do this, then the type would be wrong. We would have a title here. It's a property and it's just of type string. But the property wrapper exposes, if I hit escape here, you can see that this is creating a binding to a string, which matches the type here. So Swift is really important about matching our types. So let's go ahead and go to the next one. I hit tab to go to the next one. The prompt is the placeholder text that I want to be visible. So in this case, I'm just going to do a text, and I always want to have title be visible in the prompt. And then the label, depending on the platform, the label may or may not show. And I think by default, it tends to not show, but I'm just going to put it in as a placeholder. So I'm just going to do text and then title again. So in this UI, I don't know if I can get it to, I don't know off the top of my head how to get it to display, but this is not actually displaying right now. So if I typed like title now, you're not going to see title now in the UI. But if I type title now here, you're going to see title now here. Okay. So that's the nice thing about the preview. And if you don't see the preview because it's not building, over here on the right, this button is going to allow you to customize the viewing experience. So if you just see your code right now and it looks like this, you can show this preview, which is down here at the bottom. So this is using the new preview syntax. The keyboard shortcut is going to be Command Option P. Sorry, no, that's to start the preview. To show the preview right now, it's Command Option Enter. So Command Option Enter brings up the preview or it will hide it. So we can just practice that, Command Option Enter. And here we can start typing something. So we could say row 2020 or row 2014 or 2015. That could be the title of this album. So preview is a little bit interactive here. It's not a fully functional app, but some of the elements are interactive so you can sort of see how they work. Okay, so as I'm typing, right now it is mutating the state of title. So it's updating that under the hood. Okay, and if we were to just go ahead and run this, we'll see this appear over on the right. And if we've hooked up everything, you should see your title. And there it is. It just takes a little bit. So you're going to have to wait for it depending on your Mac. If you've got a M1, M2, or M3 Mac or something better than that, you're going to have to wait for that to initially boot up. Okay, so we've learned how to get it started. I'm just going to go back to photo table just so that we have that frame of reference. Okay, and we're going to predominantly work off the preview. So as you're working on this, if you run the app, it's going to pause the preview. And the way to get the preview back is to click this little button. So this little reset icon or the keyboard shortcut. I'm a big fan of keyboard shortcuts, is Control Option P to show the preview again. Control Option P, show preview. Okay, the other keyboard shortcut that we learned today is Control Option Enter. That's to show and hide. And I would say not show preview, but run preview. And we're technically showing and hiding the canvas, so that's Control Option Enter. Okay, so those are super helpful. And then the last one is just going to be run the app, and that's just going to be a Command plus R. I do that all the time. The other option is hitting this run button up top. Okay, so now we know how to get started. We know some keyboard shortcuts. Hopefully you've learned something. If you've learned something, hit the like button. You can subscribe. I'm going to be making more tutorials on UI design, sort of going over the basics of this type of stuff. All right. I want to customize the keyboard. I don't know if I can get the keyboard to appear here, but I can get it to appear up top. If I toggle the software keyboard, that's going to be a Command K. So in the simulator, Command K will toggle the software keyboard so you can sort of see what that looks like. And do I want to update that? No, that keyboard looks pretty good. There's other types of keyboards we can do, but I'm not super worried about that one. All right, the other thing you can do is like when someone hits enter or return on one of those text fields, you can have it do something. So just a quick thing for that is the on submit. So on submit, all we're going to do is we're going to do an action and we're going to print the title. So we're going to do string interpolation and print out the value of title. And you can go ahead, run the app, type something and press enter, or type something, turn on the software keyboard, and that's the simulator. It's going to be Command K. Okay, so next up, let's work on manage album row. So this is going to be complicated because we're going to have an image. We are going to have a text attribute. We're going to have we're going to have a spacer that's going to fill up the open space here. And then we're going to have another text attribute. And then we're going to have a image. Okay, so that's going to be the structure. So rather than doing it all in one, we can do it all in one place. I wanted to abstract it a little bit and show you how to build a little component so that we could do that. So let's go ahead and create a new structure. And we're going to just go ahead and build this out. So we're going to do a struct, and this is going to be a manage album row. And I'm just going to make this a subclass of view. And with that, we are going to have one variable, which is going to be the count that we're going to start with. We're just blocking this out. Maybe I'll pass in the image. That might make sense. Yeah, let's pass the image in as well. So I'm going to say var image is going to be let's say it's a UI image. And then we're going to have a var for our count. And then this image is really sort of the hero image or the album image. This count is going to be a integer, so it's the number of photos. It can be 0 or a value greater than 0. And then let's go ahead and add the body. So if we start typing body, we get the autocomplete if xcode's happy. And we can just press enter. It will auto insert some of that code. We can finish with our curly braces and do that. Now, since we have two properties, they kind of need default images. If we're just blocking, we're not too worried about passing information. So for right now, what I'm going to do is we're going to create a UI image, and we're going to pass in some attributes here. So we're just going to start it with an initial value. So we're going to use the system name. And then here we're going to just do photo. And then for our count, let's just have a number like 27 and say there's 27 of them, so we have something to work with. Now we can say something like manage album, and that will hopefully appease Xcode. And let's see, what doesn't it like? So it's worried about this not existing. For demo purposes, I'm going to just force unwrap. That's not safe for user content, but if we're just blocking the UI, don't worry about making it safe, making it work. We just want to see what this is going to look like. Okay, so that's going to be our manage album row. Let's go ahead and put one of these in. So I'm going to just say manage album row. We'll create it. Since it's got some default parameters, we're going to see it appear here. So that's super cool. And now we have to customize it a little bit more. So what we want is a horizontal stack. We're going to fill it up with an image and all of these things that I discussed right here. So this is kind of our leading principle. Let's bring this down. We need some kind of image to start. So let's create an image. And then this is going to be a UI image. So we have UI image here. We pass in our hero image, which is going to be our starting image. And there you can see the icon. Now, if it crashes here, because if you put like ASDF, that's going to cause preview to crash. And you'll get this nice little report saying, something bad happened, assertion failure. I don't know if we'll see. You're going to see a crash on the initialization, and then you have to sort of deduce what went wrong. I'm not sure you're going to get any clues that we have an implicitly unwrapped or force unwrapped optional. So that's like how this is not safe. Risky. Okay. But for prototyping, it's okay. And that's going to keep crashing every time you make an edit and mess things up. So make sure that if you're using this image, and we're going to see this a bunch, you're using a valid thing. So what are valid values for this string? Well, if you have the SF Symbols app, SF Symbols is from Apple. You can download this find it on, if you just Google it, you will find it. You have to install it. It's going to have all of these things. We can search for different terms. So if you wanted to look up like dog, you'd see icons for dog. If you want to do walk, you'd see some icons there. Run, let's say ski, you're going to see some stuff here. Okay. So photo, I need some kind of placeholder. These are all the options that we can choose from. And so if you want a different option for managing, like, well, that option might not be the best placeholder. If we're managing like a single image, that's probably a single image. Let's think about this. Maybe this photo on a rectangle is better. Maybe this photo on a rectangle fill is better. I kind of like this one. So pick whichever one you think is interesting. Right click on it, say copy name, and then paste it in here. That looks way better. Okay. Now what's going on here? Why do we have an image and then manage album? We're in a form, and so it's putting everything vertical. And we just created a body with two things in it, which isn't, I don't know if this is proper, but you can still do it, and it seems to like figure out to not break. And in this situation, because we're in a form which supports vertical layout, it seems to work. But what we really want is a horizontal layout. So how do we get that? We use a HStack, which is short for a horizontal stack. So we just do that, open it up, put curly braces, surround the content, and magically we now have manage album. Okay, so we're just blocking this out. So next, what I want is to have the other text. So let's see what would happen if we put that number in. To put a number in text, we do string interpolation. So we need to convert that count into a string using the string interpolation. So we can do that, and we see 27. But it would look better if we had parentheses around it. So let's append some parentheses on it. And so that looks better. But you can see we're not matching the intent. It shouldn't be the focus. So we can play with color and font to make it less prominent. So let's go ahead and make this, actually, let's not worry too much about it. Let's finish blocking it first. I'm getting ahead of myself on the customization. We talked earlier about we want to block the UI, then we want to tweak it, then we want to connect it. So let's follow my advice so that we don't get stuck in a rabbit hole when we just want to make this functional. Okay, so next I need another image, and this next image, I want some kind of shape. So let's just use, actually that's not going to compile. So like we need to create a new image using a system name. We don't necessarily need to use an UI image, but for the placeholder for this one, this is going to be coming from real app data. So I really kind of want to work with a UI image. For this image, we can use the built-in SwiftUI image. And that's going to allow us to work directly with stuff from like SF symbols. So let's jump on over to SF symbols. We need some kind of arrow. So if we look at our arrows, like these are the different types of arrows. I'm just searching for something. But what I really want is what we call a chevron. So let's see if that exists. And here we see some chevrons. Oh, that's a cool one for a button. So there's different styles. If you don't want the style that I have, you can always customize it. But this chevron right is pretty standard on iOS. So this is something that I would recommend. So if we right click and copy the symbol name, that's what we're going to use here. And so how do we write it? Well, there's a bunch of initializers. If we hit escape, we'll see all of them. Now, it can be a little bit overwhelming to figure out which one to use. And so it helps to just do this via practice. And so this, I know there's also a system name, which matches the UIKit initializer. So system name will give us access to this. We just need to give it a string. And whoa, did I copy the wrong thing? I wanted to copy the actual name, not the symbol. I think I copied the symbol and pasted it as Unicode. So we don't want that. We want chevron.write. And just make sure you've typed this correctly before you redo your preview, and you should see this appear over on the right. Okay, so that's looking pretty cool. The other thing I want to do is I want to tone them down, and we still haven't addressed the spacing. So the way SwiftUI works is things will be as close as possible to the next thing as we're working with them. But if we want to separate these two things, we can use a spacer. And spacer is just going to create a spacer that will fill empty space. And so that's going to grow to fill the space. And what you'll see is that it fills this space right here. Once we do that, that's looking a lot better. I still want to tone this down. And how do we tone it down? Well, we can actually group these two things. So I'm going to do a group. And then I'm going to end it here. And then what I want to do is I want to apply an attribute to both of these. So we can use the tint and we can give it a gray color. And this is a context dependent gray that's suitable for UI use, which should work on both light and dark modes, which is one of the fixes that I need to do for photo table. So let's go ahead and use gray here. And that should tone down the attributes. And then let's do Command Option P and see if that updates. And I'm seeing no update. So what didn't work? Did that change? We can run it on the simulator. I'm just not seeing that gray color. I don't know if I'm a little colorblind on this. Let's make it obvious. Make it red. Okay, I don't think it's tints then. You know what? I wrote this code, but I don't know. We might need to use foreground style instead. Okay, foreground style it is. I don't know if I actually tested the color. I wasn't paying attention when I did my prototyping for this lesson. Okay, foreground color is being deprecated. Foreground style is the new thing. So let's see if we can use gray and if it will apply to both. Great. Okay, I'm just going to delete this line. Okay, so that looks pretty good. That toned it down. You might want to play with the chevron color. Like maybe we don't want them the same color, but we're just going to leave it at that for right now. So that's going to give us the manage album feature. And we just keep working on the next thing in our list. So what is next? Let's go back to photo table. I have an add photos button. So how can we implement that? Well, we're going to create a button. So what is that going to look like? We're going to layer it. And what I want is I want a sort of a full width button with some rounded corners. And we're just going to sort of design that UI. So let me grab some water. I'm going to go ahead and start a button. Now there's a lot of things that we can do with a button. I'm looking for one that takes an action and a label. So this one is looking pretty good. There's a bunch of these that we can use and sort of customize. And the one that I'm going to use is more backward compatible. There's some newer ones that require like iOS 17. So depending on your requirements, you might want something that's more compatible on newer things. So we're going to call this is our add photos pressed. And we're just doing a print statement just to show that it's working. We've got a label, and then this is going to be add photos, and you'll see that here. Now, If you want an action to be more prominent so that people can find it, you can use color to make it stand out more. If you want to sort of fit in with Apple, we could not do it like this, and we can do it like this. It's really your call, like how you want to design it. This is a prominent thing. Like if you don't add photos to this album, it's just not going to look good. It's not going to feel good. I want to make this as obvious as possible. So I'm going to call attention to this button, but I'm not going to call attention to the delete button. The delete button is secondary. The adding of photos is really important because otherwise you can't use the app. If there's no photos on the table, you can't play with them. You can't move them around. You can't show them. You can't start slideshows. So to make this more prominent, I am going to create a ZStack. A ZStack is where we start layering things on top of each other. So you're going to have a background, and then you're going to put text on top of it. And that's a ZStack. So we worked with HStack, which is horizontal stack. We worked with a vert stack, which is a VStack, which is like the form. The form is a VStack. So this is a VStack. And now we're going to work with a ZStack, which allows us to do layering and create complex layered effects. So for this, we're going to put the text on top of a rounded rectangle. So let's go ahead and create a rounded rectangle. And we're going to do the corner size with a style attribute. Holding the option key should make it enter everything for you. It's not changing xcode. I don't know if I have to quit xcode to make this work, but I'm just going to hold the option key, press enter, and it's going to insert both of those parameters. Otherwise, it won't insert them by default unless they've changed the way this one works, which we could try that one more time. So if I type rounded rectangle and I select this one and press enter, okay, that one selected both. Maybe it's certain APIs are annotated as, it's probably the default type. So this one doesn't have default types. So that's probably what's going on here. For the corner radius, I'm going to go with something like 8 or 10, and then I'm going to do continuous, which is going to give us that nice smooth button that's kind of the Apple design aesthetic. The rounded, the other option, the circular, is not going to be as smooth on the rounding. Okay, so that's the biggest difference. This is going to feel more like the corners on your MacBook or your monitor from Apple. They all have this continuous curve that just makes the shape look very iconic. Okay, we can't see the text anymore. We've layered it on top. And so with a ZStack, this is going to be our top layer, or sorry, this is, I'm saying it wrong. This is our bottom layer, and then this is going to be our top layer. So we can't see the text because the text color is not different. If we take this away, comment this out, you'll see that add photos is a blue color. So we need to modify this, and let's use that style. So foreground style is the new attribute to use in iOS 17. And for this, we're just going to go with a white color. So add photos. Interesting. So Apple's doing something smart here. Because I've layered it, they actually centered it for us. I thought I was going to have to do that, but I don't have to. So that just makes it more prominent and takes up that space, gives us a button that users can tap on and play around with. So that's cool. So that is our button. And we can customize the button color. So here we could set the fill, and we could do red, and you'd see that we have a red button. I'm just going to do this blue color as a default color. Okay, so play around with a color that makes sense for you. So we have 2 more sliders, a date picker, and a delete album button. So let's go ahead and do that. So I want to kind of unify the user interface here. And we previously used these section headers, and then we had a label on the left and then a slider on the right. And it's a lot to look at. You're looking left and right. And so your focus is here, and then your focus is here, your focus is here. And it just doesn't feel unified. So I think instead of like, I'd like to show the number, but I'd actually just like to have the slider with labels on either side. And so I think that's what we're going to do here. So we're going to create a slider. And okay, here we can see an instance where there's some like parameters that are not going to be default. So if you hold that option key, you're going to notice that the in variable, the on editing, they're both kind of grayed out. Holding option will make it so that you can insert those. If you don't, it's just going to do the bare minimum. For this one, I want to have the value, the in, the label, the minimum value label, and the maximum value label. Now, I do think this, depending on the style, the label, just like with the text field, isn't always going to display. And then the step, what's the step going to be? This one's going to be an integer based. So I don't really need this step. Do I need, on editing changed. So we have another callback here. That's kind of exciting. I don't think I did that. Let's make sure we get all of these then. So we do that. So this is going to take another binding, which means we need a new variable. So let's go up top and create a state var. And then for this, I believe we're going to be working with double values. So let's look at this. This is a binary floating point number. So I am going to work with doubles in this. We're going to create so slideshow images is really the max photos on table. And that's going to be a double. We'll set it initially to 5 photos. It's going to be a double because that's what we need to work with a slider. It's going to be a floating point number. I don't think it works with ints. So we can translate it into an int later, but to get it to compile, we're going to need that. Okay, so we have the max number of photos on the table. We're going to pass that in as a binding. So to create the binding, we're going to use that dollar symbol, and we're going to start typing max photos on table. You'll see that it's a binding to a double. Press enter. And then we need a range. So this is the minimum and the maximum. In this case, what I'm going to do is I think my maximum might have been like 10 photos and my minimum was 1. So we're going to go ahead and use a range of 1 to 10. So let's go ahead and just do that. The step, I don't think I want to customize this. It's just going to increment, I think, by 1. So I'm just going to delete that. And then the label, I don't think this will show, but if it does show, let's print out these values. So I hit enter. Now it's going to let us autocomplete these. So the label is going to be text, and then I'm going to just do int of the value max photos on table. And then the minimum value label, we're just going to say is 1. So text of 1. And then the maximum is going to be text of 10. Now, if you're going to have constants or something to define this, you're going to want a variable to control your max and your min. These aren't going to change in my app. I know what these are. I know what the UI I'm matching. So I don't need to. All right, next up, we've got this closure. And this closure is on editing change. We can look at the documentation. So I did a option click to bring this up. Or if you do a command click, that's going to take us to the actual value. And here we can see all the documentation in code format. But if you want to see it just as a pop-up, we're just going to do the option click. Okay, so this is called when it begins and ends. Editing begins when a user starts to drag the thumb along the slider track on iOS. And it's going to probably vary a little bit per platform. What I wanted to find out is what is this bool? And it didn't tell me. So let's do that command click. And they don't have a label here. Well, I don't know what to take away from this, but we can just see what that does, and we can print out the value. And then we'll print out whatever this is, and we'll find out what that is. So a lot of times when I don't know what something is, if the documentation doesn't indicate, you just got to try it. So now we have our slider. You can see there's no label. So if we want a label, what we could do is we could create a HStack, which is a horizontal stack, wrap that around this. And then at the very beginning, we put text and then whatever our label is. So in this case, I think we just want to call it slideshow images. And if you have a better name for this, great. I don't have a great name for this. It's really tight now. So slideshow images 1 is like smushed together because it's a long word. And it's one of the reasons we separated it. So if I could find something shorter, maybe that would work. But the other thing that we can do is we can play with the spacing. So I'm going to go to where the HStack is, and we're going to start typing spacing, colon, and this has a parameter that we can pass it to pass an additional spacing. So let's try 16. What that's going to do is it's going to shove it over. If we try 32, we'll see it shoves it over a little bit more. So somewhere between that, maybe 20 is kind of the sweet spot. That gives us enough sort of visual separation to make this understandable, and then we can just sort of drag left and right. Okay, so that is our first slider. We can cheat and copy and paste to create a new slider. Now, if we start doing this, you're going to notice that it's going to update both. So we need a second variable to represent, in this case, it's going to be our slideshow speed. And I think the speed, it might go from 0 to like 1. So that's not going to work well now that they're still using the same variable. So let's go ahead and create a new variable. So we updated the range, and we need a new variable to replace here. So up top, we're going to say @state var, and then this is going to be slideshow speed. That's a double equals, let's say 0.5. Again, we're just blocking this out, so we just need a value to start, and 0.5 will be right in the center here. So we'll go ahead and use that. And then instead of max photos on table, we change this to slideshow speed. And here we can print out what slideshow speed is. But we don't see this, so like you're not going to see this right now in this UI. Ideally, I would want to print out fast or slow, which gets us to our text here. 1 and 10 doesn't really mean anything to people, so let's give them something that might make more sense. So if we say slow and fast, now you can be like, oh, okay, I kind of like it a little bit on the faster side. So we're just blocking the UI. Now they're no longer connected because they're not referencing the same variable, and we can move them around. Okay, and then we have 2 more elements. So right here we have our date, and then we have our delete album button. So let's go ahead and create a date picker. And here we have a few different options. I want a title, a selection, and I want to control the displayed components. So I'm going to go for this one here. Holding Alt doesn't change anything because all of these parameters will be inserted into the code once I press enter. So I just go ahead and do that. Here, we're just going to do a date of some format. You could write capture date. I was trying to think about like what makes the most sense. To me, date by itself sort of makes sense, but it's really a judgment call. Now, this is going to take another binding to a date. So we need a new variable at the top. So let's go ahead and create a new state property. And this is going to be our date. This is a date object. We'll initially set this to date, which will be now. Okay, these are just placeholders. We're just blocking the UI so that we have something functional. So date, and set it to its a brand new date. We scroll back down to the bottom. We can bind to date with a $sign, type in date, and then the displayed components allows us to customize what is displayed. So here we use the dot syntax. So if you just want, well, actually, if we don't specify, we will get something. So if I say hour and minute, what does that look like? Well, now we see hour and minute. That's not what I want here. So let's say date. Now it's a date. Perfect. I don't need the time. And then I think if we go with the default, let's see what it does. The default will do both. Which is kind of cool, but for my use case, I just need date. Just like that, we have this awesome picker that allows you to do so many cool things with all these different sliders. It manages all the UI presentation, so we don't have to worry about all of those lines of code that we had to write in Objective-C. That's one line. It's amazing. Plus a variable. Okay, so that's that. And then we have our last thing, which is a button. So this last button, we're just going to do a new button. We could copy and paste, but I think going through the action of actually writing this code is helpful. It does save a little bit of time to copy and paste. But if you're learning this and you want to remember what the labels are for the different UI elements that you're adding, you can just type them out. So we're going to have an action. We're going to have some kind of label. And Xcode is going to help us with a lot of this stuff. So here we're going to say delete. Now, we could just say delete, but I found that that's not very clear. So we have to think about the problem that we're working on. As a user, if I just say delete, what does that mean? I need some context. So here we're going to say album so that we delete the album. And that makes a lot more sense. Now you're going to notice that it's blue. How do we get it to not be blue? Well, there's another button initializer that allows us to do and control whether it's destructive or not. And that's the role attribute. And to get access to that, it might be a different initializer. So let's, again, look at our button initializer. And we're going to look for title, role, action. So this is the one that we actually want. So title, and it's in a totally different order. So I can't just like copy and paste. Awesome. So if I do, it's not giving me it. Hold escape or press control spacebar. We're going to look for that role action label. Title action. I don't know which one of these is newer, but I'm going to go with this one. So this is just the string, delete album. I'm going to hit tab to go to the next thing, type dot, and we're going to say this is destructive. And then action, press tab to get to it, and then press enter to insert, and we're just going to print out delete album. Okay, so now you see that it's red, it's on the side, it's not as prominent. This is a prominent action. This is not a prominent action. We can get rid of the extra button. So let's go ahead and just delete that, save it, and there we go. If you have a problem, if you forget one of these parentheses, these don't match up, just make sure they match. Your quote, you got to make sure those match. And make sure your braces match. If all else fails and you're trying to type this and follow along, just start over. The more repetitions you get, especially if you're new to SwiftUI, the easier it's going to get to write this code. But you have to sort of go through the motions. You have to follow what I'm doing, type out the code, look at the different APIs, and sort of see what's working. Okay, so here we can see details on button. If I want to see this particular one, we can read all about it. So if that was an option click. If I command click on this role, that'll take us to where it's defined. And so we can see this is available in iOS 15. So depending on how new your application is, you typically might need to make decisions on which of these button APIs. Some of these are for iOS 13, some of them are iOS 15. I don't know. I'm assuming, yeah, we're going to see 17. So like here's some stuff that's iOS 17 specific. If we're just searching with Command F, there's a lot of things in here. So this is all of SwiftUI, it looks like. So you've got 772 matches of specifically for iOS, potentially. It's also matching on tvOS. So if we search for iOS 17, there's 403 APIs in here that are specific. And some of these are groupings for iOS 17. So that's a lot of stuff. Okay. So if this was helpful, click the like button, comment down below if you have any questions or if you get stuck on something. That's how we can create a form. We started with a problem, and the problem was we have to convert this old user interface into something new. And we're doing this because we want to support dark and light modes, which didn't exist when I made this app in 2012 in Objective-C. There's also, we didn't adopt, in 2012 is when auto layout came out. We didn't use that. We just did frame-based UI. So there's a lot of things that we can leverage in the newer iOS versions and in Xcode that we're trying to sort of get back to. All right, so there's one more thing I want to show you, and that's actually running this on the simulator. So let's go ahead. I forgot to do this. Let's hit the play button, and that will pause our preview, load this up on the simulator. So now we can type with the keyboard. If you don't see the keyboard, press Command K to show it. My favorite album. It's going to go away if you type with the Mac keyboard, but you can bring it back up and you can manually peck at these if you really want to. Okay, clicking on Manage Album is not really going to do anything right now. And then we've got the Add Photos. Actually, Manage Album needs to be a button. That's a small oversight on my part, but you can wrap that up as a button so that it can do that. We've got our Add Photos button. It is selecting that. So there's some customization that we can do to make it behave a little bit different. I'm not going to cover that right now, but I just want to show you how to test this. Change true, change false. Interesting. So I think it's this is when it's interactive, and then this is when it's done. I didn't know what change meant, so false I think just means I've released the thumb. And then here we can see this slider. I didn't update a label here, so let me just fix that real quick. That's our speed. And if we run this again, you're going to see speed changed. We let go. Cool. And then the problem is we didn't do the We didn't update the stride. So that's something you can play around with. Again, we're just sort of blocking this out. We've got the little picker here. Well, in the actual app, we have the picker. We can pick a different date. And that will update. And then if we want to delete, we can click that button. You see it deletes album. So it's functional. There's still some more cleanup to do, but hopefully that gives you a starting point. All right. So I was editing this and I realized I need to make this a button. So let's jump in here real quick and make this a button because this whole thing is supposed to be a button. So we have this HStack, which is great. But what we really need is a button. It's going to take an action. We're actually going to pass in a action, and then there's going to be a label. And let's go ahead and do that. And the label is going to be everything that we have right here. So I'll just move this curly brace down here. And typically Xcode will auto indent if you rewrite that. So I'm just going to backspace shift curly brace to get that indentation, delete these extra lines. And it can't find the action. Just like before, we're going to stub out the action. So let's just say var action, and this is going to be a closure. And I don't know if it's going to be optional, but we'll just say it's going to be this. So it's going to take no parameters, have no return type. That's our action. In this case, we could have a default action, or we could write an initializer. Now I'm getting to the point where I kind of want that initializer. So let's go ahead and make that initializer. And we'll go ahead and insert that logic. So this is our manage album. And what do we need to do? So probably have to update something because this doesn't have a default value. So up top, we're going to see missing an argument. So let's fix this. Insert these things. So we had our hero image down here. Right now we're passing it in. We might as well just grab this right here and pass this in as a starting point. So let's paste that. And then the count, we'll just do 27. The action, I don't know why that didn't autocomplete for us, but this is just going to be a closure. And we can say print tapped or add photos. Sorry, this is manage photos. Wow, it's late. Okay, so now we have another hook. I missed this. This was in my notes, but I didn't do it properly. And so now we see manage photos press when we run it. So hitting this run button, we see all that. I hope you found this valuable. If you have any questions or other topics, or if you want to see me make different UIs, please comment down below. And I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in my next video, which will probably be on my job search. So thanks for watching. I'll see you later.